Hello, everybody. Welcome back to GenUX Intrinsic Data. Today, we're talking to Ashley, who has an amazing company with an amazing product, and we're going to talk about her journey, how she began in medical device, and how she ended up creating, her own company and the whys behind it. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to Ashley. Ashley, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everybody. I am Ashley Crafton, and as Staci said, I am the CEO of Galena Innovations. We are a medical device company that is building some devices that address spontaneous preterm birth, and I'm a nurse by trade and love what I do.
Thank you, Ashley. So, when we first engaged, you kind of have this amazing story. You've lived here, you've lived in Europe, you've come back, you've created this, but the whole impetus for this kind of started post 9/11. So tell us how your first journey started. Like, how did you start your journey into the medical industry to start with?
Yeah, so it's a little bit interesting. Um, Over 20 years ago now, 25 years ago, I was a senior in high school and wanted to go to art school. And my mother thought that was a terrible idea. And when I told her that that's what I wanted to do, she ordered me promptly to get in the car. And as we were driving, she said, "If you could be anything else, what would it be?" And I said, "I don't know, maybe a nurse or something." And um, anyway, she said, "If you could be a nurse, what kind of nurse would you be?" And I don't know why I picked this, but I said, "I don't know, maybe one that delivers babies." And she pulled into an obstetrician's office and made me get out and said, "You go ask them for a job." And I did what she asked and walked in. And I'm sure I said something super intelligent like, "My mom says I have to ask you for a job." And they said, "When can you start?" Anyway, uh, I ended up starting on September 11th, 2001. And it was, I'm sure everybody remembers where they were that day and what was happening, but they had pulled a TV into the break room and we were watching that all. During the following months after all of that happened, I really fell in love with all things obstetrics, moms, babies, the whole thing, and also really had that pivotal moment in the back of my mind and really wanted to be of service in any way I could if I was ever called on to do something in a situation like that. And so I think those kind of two things that happened in my life drove me to go to nursing school. So I went to college for nursing, worked my way through college in a NICU, and then started right out in labor and delivery. And worked there for several years and loved it. With my kind of early days in art background, I had spent a lot of time in the darkroom and with photography, and so as soon as I got really acquainted with labor and delivery, I got asked to be part of our hospital's perinatal loss team, which is when people lose their babies. And they needed someone to be a photographer. And so I worked as a photographer. I would get called in when people lost their babies. And from the time I very first started working on labor and delivery, I was on those perinatal loss teams all throughout my career. And it really had an impact on me and the direction that took my career into preterm birth. So that's kind of my background and how I ended up getting here. But anyway.
So let's talk a little bit more about that because this is the interesting segue into your creation, your business, and how you ended up coming up with the idea. It really kind of started when, 20 years ago when you started to do these things. So talk to me about like how that impact changed your trajectory that many years ago.
Yeah. I think there's kind of two main things that really changed my trajectory. Coming from a nursing background, the key component of being a nurse is being a problem solver for your patient, an advocate for your patient, but really figuring out what their needs are and how we can best fulfill them. Nursing looks at holistically at a patient, not just at their medical issues, but making sure that we are treating a whole patient. And I think when you frame it in that way, nurses really are the key to solving any healthcare issue in the US and beyond. Florence Nightingale, who's the mother of nursing, she was kind of the first evidence-based practice scientist. And she always talked about looking, although she framed it in a different way because she didn't have the modern vocabulary that we have around scientific research. If you look at what she taught, she was really looking at look at what's happening, record what's happening, and find the ways to change it. And I think that had a really big impact on me. And then along with those working in perinatal loss, preterm birth is the biggest contributor to people losing their babies. And, whenever anything goes wrong, those families ask the same question, which is, why can't we do anything about whatever it is that just happened to me, whether you lose a baby or not? It is pretty stark, I think, to most families when they realize what we can do outside of obstetrics to solve medical issues. And then within obstetrics, we really have no answers, not even basic science. And so it's frustrating for those families. And that tends to be a question that is asked to the nurses. And so being frustrated with that question always being asked, I thought, I'm just going to go read the research. And when you take the 50,000-foot view and look back through the last 100 years of obstetrics and things that we've tried, things kind of fall into two buckets. One is medications that cause harm and don't work, and we continue to try those over and over and over again. And everything else falls into this bucket of compressing the cervix closed in order to prevent early cervical change, which in order to have a baby come out, you have to have your cervix changed. So at the surface, that sounds like a great pathway to take. The interesting thing is compression on the cervix is actually a technique that we use to induce labor. So from my perspective, this just seemed completely backwards. And so I really dug into that issue. And it turns out that there's been about 60 years worth of research into highly collagenous bodies. The cervix is one of those bodies that has a lot of collagen in it. And when you compress highly collagenous bodies, it actually stimulates the collagen to break down and become soft, which is the first step in cervical change. And when you stretch that same tissue, what you have is an immediate stiffness change as those collagen crosslinks are pulled on. And then exposure to that over time actually stimulates regrowth of the collagen and reorganization to stiffen it in a way that it better bears the load that continuously is being placed on it. That's one of the reasons why when you lift weights, your bones get stronger. It's actually the collagen remodeling in your bones to better bear that load. Anyway, so that alone and kind of having that aha moment of, I think we're doing the wrong thing, was pretty powerful. But I really didn't have any intention to do anything about it, mainly because I felt out of place as a nurse and as a bedside nurse, not being prepared in science or academics or, business, whatever background that I felt like I needed. But I went into work that night, and a woman that I had cared for a week earlier came in, and she was complaining of labor symptoms. And she was about 21 weeks pregnant. We had placed a cerclage on her earlier, which is when we take a very thick suture. It's called a Merceline stitch. It looks about the size of a shoelace on the largest needle that they make, and they lace that through the cervix and they pull it tight. It's a compressive measure. And that tore through, and she delivered a baby that was too young to survive. And I knew at that moment that she would ask me the question of, why can't we do anything about that? And I felt like that I couldn't, knowing what the conclusions that I came to, I couldn't face her unless I was willing to just maybe make a phone call about it. And I also felt like at that moment pretty upset with the system that I felt like was harming women and that wasn't getting any better. And I realized that I was part of that system. And if I wasn't willing to go and do anything about it, that I was part of the problem. And so I decided to call a cervical physiology research team at Columbia University just to get their feedback, not thinking they would call me back, but they did. And we had a good conversation about it. And they thought it was very plausible that this could work. And so I read a textbook about medical device design and businesses out of Stanford Biodesign. And I thought, well, I'll just call Stanford Biodesign and see if they'd chat with me. And they did. Yeah. And I'm nurse so-and-so from nowhere. And they did. And anyway, I got a phone call back from them and met. And they said, I do think you're onto something. And it was just little steps over time that really impacted going forward.
So where were you in your career when you had this aha moment? Like, how many years in as a nurse were you, and where were you in the world? Were you in the States? Because we know that you also did Ashley also happened to do these same working abroad in Germany for a while, and then you came back. So around what time in your career do you think that all these things started to fall into place really organically? Without
I would say, it's hard to pinpoint, like, this is when these thoughts started happening, but I feel like probably that was 2018 maybe, and I was in Germany at that point. So I worked for several years in Indiana, and then about a year in Idaho, and my husband and I received an offer to go live in Europe. My husband's an opera singer, and I got an offer from the U.S. Army to go work on an army base in southern Germany. And I was in Germany when all of this went down. Interestingly enough, Germany is pretty involved in preterm birth research. And there is a device there called the Arabin pessary that has been around since the 1960s there's been some mixed bag reviews on whether or not it works. The U.S. did a large study in 2023 that showed that with some women, it actually accelerated the path to delivery. And if you kind of look at the science, although there wasn't, they didn't look at mechanisms with this study. They did, however, look at the breakdown of who was delivering early. And what they saw was moms that were already going to be delivering early. Some of them were delivering even more early than they were, and caused fetal and neonatal death for them, which was really tragic. But it does go to support that possibly if those are too tight, they're creating that compression that is accelerating that cervical change for them. So it actually was kind of the perfect place to be when I started jumping into this.
That's really cool. So let's talk a little bit more about research, because you actually throughout your career have done quite a bit of research into this before going and creating a product that you are.
Yeah.
We can slightly talk about it, but it's not in the public yet. So we'll talk about it in like more of a roundabout way to describe kind of what it does as opposed to just explaining exactly what it is. I think that's the best way to get through this. So it sounds like throughout a couple of different continents and through a couple of different concepts, there was a lot of research that was done throughout. I mean, you weren't just sitting there coming up with the hypotheses without any background. You were like, okay, well, if you do this thing and it inspires growth and it helps your uterus become stronger, well, why don't we work on a product that's going to engage that thing? And then you continue to do research. It wasn't like the first round of things that you went through, and then you went to Europe and you found other resources and things of that nature, and then you called a couple of different colleges, and those colleges started to help you out. So let's start talking about, like, after you got those two colleges interested, so Stanford and it was, I believe, Columbia you mentioned, is that correct? Mm-hmm. So once you got those two engaged, like, how did that turn and dip and dive with the continued education that you just, I don't know if you really sought it out, but it kind of just surfaced when you were in Germany. So let's talk about how all that stuff came together for you. How did that in your brain just turn into what it is that you're working on now? How did your hypothesis come together through all that information that you were gathering?
That's a great question. I think it just happened piece by piece, very little, just little bits at a time. I remember finding on YouTube, actually, a professor talking about collagen crosslinks and how they unfurl and uncoil with stretch and that process that happens, which then took me in a deep dive of just reading other people's research of how this worked and how as those collagen crosslinks kind of, it's a triple helix shaped molecule and they tighten when they are
Will you
compressed,
explain what that
which
means to people who are,
what's that?
I know what that means, you know what that means, but a triple helix molecule,
Yes.
can you give it to us in like, say we're 7 years old and we've never heard of it. What does that mean to be?
So it means that they twist around each other like this. The most common helix molecule that people are familiar with is DNA, and it is a double helix. It has two sides, right? And they round together and they have little bonds in the middle that link up. So collagen is actually three that spiral together like a candy
I didn't know
cane
that.
and have
Oh, interesting.
these bonds in the middle. And so when they compress, they twist up like a spring. And when they stretch, they unfurl and then they lock in place after they get pulled on a certain time. And it was just little things like discovering that you have this immediate stiffness change as they unfurl and those cross links kind of pull tight. And then the next thing that happens is they add more bonds so that when they pull tight, they stay more stiff. And then they add more bonds so that when you pull out and the thing that's pulling on them goes away, they stay at rest in the same place. And you can look at this in a lot of different ways. There actually was some research done when older adults get braces on their teeth, that even just moving your lip out, they would have collagen fill in their lips and their wrinkles would go away. And so right, go braces. And so it was just all of these little pieces of things that kind of came together. There's been a lot of research on blood vessels and how in order to grow a blood vessel in a petri dish that will sustain your life, you actually have to grow it under a pulse because it has to be stretched in order to be stiff enough that it won't collapse when it's in your body. And lots of things on tendons and ligaments, and not a lot on the cervix. And that led me to doing our first in vitro collagen study in Germany, to kind of confirm that is actually how the cervix works. There had been some preliminary work by a team at Columbia University, and I had read their research, and it was very fascinating. And what we saw, we took cervical collagen and embedded it on little pieces of silicone, and the silicone would stretch and relax. And what they saw was, I believe, a 500% increase in the amount of type 1 and type 3 collagen in 72 hours, which is remarkable. And that was a really, really neat moment to see that, like, what I had thought would happen happened. The other really amazing moment was, we had designed a cup to go on the cervix to stretch that cervix over time. And we went to a lab for cadavers in Kansas City. Trying to find a cadaver with a cervix was difficult because most women have a hysterectomy at some point in their life. And so I had gotten on several lists across the US to be able to get a cadaver, and finally was able to get one after several months.
And just to clarify for people who don't know, cadavers are bodies that have been dedicated to science after someone has perished. So these are not live cells, they're not live active human beings. So they're not like actual clinical trials, but you're using these bodies to do medical research. It's very common, and these people have dedicated their bodies to science for these reasons. So
Yes.
just to clarify. So you found you found a cadaver.
Yes.
And because
Yes.
you were on a look for a cadaver that had a uterus, because that's
Yes.
probably really important for the product that you're
It
creating,
is.
because it works
It
with the
is.
uterus. Tell us more about this. I found this so fascinating when you told me this.
Yeah. So we had designed a cup to stretch the cervix, and went into an anatomy lab and put this on our cadaver, our gracious donor, and left that on there for 3 minutes, took that off, and then measured the stiffness of the cervix before and after. And we were able to stiffen the cervix of this woman. It was really, really remarkable. And what we were capturing was that initial stiffness change that you get as those triple helices unfurl.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really amazing to see that even in 3 minutes time, we were able to stiffen the cervix. It was
3 minutes
I think that
time
was, yeah.
with a non-alive cell, but technically
Yes.
perished cell, terminated cell.
Correct.
And it regenerated itself and became stiffer, which is
So it didn't necessarily regenerate, but it did mechanically behave exactly how we wanted it to. So that we didn't have the stimulation of growth afterwards, because you can't have growth on a dead cell, but we did have this really amazing mechanical action that was pretty impressive to see. We may or may not have been jumping up and down in the anatomy lab, you know?
I can't imagine that would ever happen. What are you talking about?
Yes.
So do you think that when you saw this, it kind of not only just made you, thrilled because your hypothesis was now coming to, like, you were gathering data points to support this concept that you had created probably 10 years prior to this, but now you're seeing it in action, and that your business, Galena, was going to carry this forward. Like, how did you just feel at that moment? I mean, obviously you were jumping up and down maybe, but like when you saw this come together and you knew that this was like the next step, like what next for you in your mind? Like, what happened with this explosion of knowledge?
There's a million things that have to come together in order to move things forward. One of the most important is funding. And in this funding environment for people in general, it's been really tough with the economy the last couple of years and in venture capital. And, let alone women's health, and not just women's health, but maternal health. That has been an even harder path to cross. And I knew at that moment we needed more money so we could do more research. And I was very excited to go out and find those people that were willing to put some money in and move it forward.
That's awesome. So your product, we're not going to say specifically what it is, but we kind of have an idea of what it is, uses this science to prevent preterm births. Yes. And the current things that are on the market, Ashley has talked about, were, basically, I mean, I've known women who have had to just what I would call sew up their cervix to keep the baby in. Mm-hmm. So what this does is it not only stops that from happening, it kind of stops you don't have to sew yourself up, we'll put it that way, but it also engages natural elements of your body to create strength. So your uterus becomes stronger to keep the baby in at a high level, is I guess it's the layman's way.
Yeah.
Based on that, that's the technology that you're creating. So tell us more about, if someone was interested in reaching out to you and giving you money to continue this funding and to continue research and to continue down this pathway, mm-hmm. where can they get a hold of you? What can they do to talk to you? Where are you in the world?
Right now, we're based in Idaho. Our research is being based in Houston, and we have some team players that are also in London. So right now, we're kind of a global network. But you can reach me through email at ashley@galenainnovations.com. You also can reach me at my website, galenainnovations.com. That's also a great place to get more information and to reach out to me.
And so where are you in your process? So medical devices, they kind of have a conceptualization, which, Ashley is obviously past because there's an actual product that's being made and actual testing being done. But When it comes to getting to market, what people don't understand is that there's a lot of work that goes into it. There's design inputs, which are documentation processes, and the design outputs, which is what the product looks like and how it works and functions in real, like it's the tangible product, where the inputs are like, I want to say like the blueprint of a house. So it's like the blueprint of a house versus the actual house, right?
Hmm.
So where are you, do you think, in your journey, and when do you think market realization, like on market,
Yeah.
your product is ready for sale? How
Yeah.
far away are you from that, do you think?
We're probably 3 to 4 years away from that. We do have version 1, and we'll probably do 2 more versions of that before we come to market. One will be with our early feasibility study that we'll be doing at Women's Hospital in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and then also kind of a concurrent study. We also have a diagnostic tool that is an advanced form of ultrasound that captures how stiff the cervix is. Studies for that are being done at UT Houston, University of Texas Houston, and their Texas Medical Center. And so we do have some concurrent studies that are happening there. And then we'll do a large pivotal trial with both of those tools after that. So we have a ways to go before FDA approval and before we really get the final product and can market that and get it out into the hands of the people who really need it.
It's amazing. So right now, Ashley's in the prototyping stage where she's still testing the concepts and the size and the product itself. And I would say like how it fits into anatomy is
Right.
the best way to explain
Yeah.
that. And that's what those pivotal clinical trials are. Once you get approved from the FDA to go into your full clinical trial, that's where you have like the 1,000-person. We'll just give it an example of 1,000 people in a trial. It's onboarded. You use the product. You prove efficacy, and then you get to do the rest of all the design inputs. So that's like phase
Right.
2, and then you're going and here's all my documents. Here's the actual final design. Here's the rest of the engineering and the testing that has to get done, and then you submit. And then it's on market. So I think people think there's like a clinical trial and then it goes to market. I don't think that people realize there's like a million steps in between, because
Right.
why would they know that, right? Like that's what we do.
Right.
Why would anybody else know that? But
Yeah.
no, I mean, this is like this type of product is such a step forward in women's health. And the inspiration behind it is like, I don't want to have these terrible conversations. There's got to be a way to move forward and get these products more engaged in these processes, because these aren't, what is like a preterm, how high of a risk is a preterm birth? Like, is it common? Is it like, do you know the
Yeah.
statistics on it?
Yeah.
Tell me a little.
So 1 in 10 babies deliver early. And some of those that deliver early, we cause are iatrogenic births, meaning maybe mom has high blood pressure and it's unsafe for her to be pregnant any longer, so we're going to induce her early, that kind of thing. About 75% of all preterm births are spontaneous, meaning we didn't cause this, a baby just came out. So this is the biggest issue really facing infants and children today, biggest cause of mortality and morbidity in children under the age of 5. So it's a very large issue within maternal health. There's really 4 big problems that need to be solved in order for us to really have better healthcare for moms and babies. Those are mental health disorders of pregnancy and postpartum, gestational hypertensive disorders or high blood pressure in pregnancy and postpartum, postpartum hemorrhage, and spontaneous preterm birth. Those issues really are what are causing the biggest poor outcomes for moms and babies both. And if we solve those 4 problems, things will drastically change.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing and
Yeah.
all the work that you're putting in. I think that when people hear this, they're going to be like, wow, that's really cool. Like, I didn't know that products like that could be made, or the thought process behind it. Just
Yeah.
to think about how collagen can create strength in your body, especially your cervix, and like helping the baby stay in. It's just amazing. And
Yeah.
again, that's how your product works. It takes actual science, things that you've noticed over your tenure as being a nurse, and your pivot
Yeah.
into this medical device development to help make life better for women and delivering babies when it's
Yeah.
appropriate, not before it's
Right.
appropriate. Yeah.
Right.
This is a hard number. 75% out
Yeah.
of 100 cases, that 1 out of 10 out of 100 cases, 75% are spontaneous birth. That is a very large number, even in a
Yeah.
small population of people who are birthing children.
Yes.
That number like global, or is that mostly just what we got from the United States?
That's
Because that does
just
make
in the United States.
okay.
Around the world, there are differing preterm birth rates. The highest is in Mauritania, which is 16%,
Where's
which
Mauritania?
Africa.
Thank you.
Yeah. Which ironically enough, there's a few places in the US. Mississippi has the highest preterm birth rate, and the US South. Most of that is from systemic racism. But among Black mothers in Mississippi, the preterm birth rate is 16%, which matches Mauritania.
That's
Yeah.
insane. That's really
Yeah.
high.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing to unpack.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Ashley, again, throw out your website, throw out your email again. We'll repeat it twice so everybody can get in contact with you should they be interested. Let us know.
Yeah. Okay. It's galenainnovations.com, and my email is ashley@galenainnovations.com. So feel free to reach out to me.
And they will also be located in the link below our YouTube post and on LinkedIn when we do send out this post. So Ashley, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Your work is so interesting. It's so exciting. It's in a great space. I love that you've taken all these pieces of research throughout the years of you doing just your job and like realizing, hey, there's a gap here and this can be dealt with. And I don't want to have these uncomfortable conversations. So you know what? I'm going to do something about it. I'm not going to have them if I don't have to. And I think that's amazing. I really do. And I'm sure that there's going to be millions of people who thank you one day.
Well,
Not yet
thank you.
today, but once it's on the market.
Yes. Yes. Well, thanks so much for supporting us and for all you do for innovation. We need people
Thank
like you. So
you.
thank you.